Hey, welcome back to our show. Our show is YOML. It's the Year of Magical Learning, and today we're on book 137, I believe, and it's about On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. And
Yeah.
Chris has an excellent reflection title he want to share, and we can discuss that afterward.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. If you don't know what On the Origin of Species is, then I don't know what cave you've been living in for, for your entire life. But this is, the Charles Darwin book, that kind of spurred a revolution, of how we think about, evolutionary history and the origin of species and kind of where the things come from and how things evolve. And back in the 1800s. So the reflection title is "Shut Up and Listen," or "Shut Up and Watch." Sorry. I'm not gonna, this book. Like I said, it's on the origin of species. Everybody knows it. I mean, and if you don't, go read it yourself. I mean, it's about survival of the fittest, and natural selection and all the things that we all know is commonplace today that were not known back then when Charles Darwin kind of dropped this truth bomb on the world, of his hypothesis on the theory of evolution and natural selection. As a matter of fact, he didn't want to do it. He's a religious guy, and he was like, I don't want to do this, but he was like, I can't deny what I've been watching my entire life, and and the notes I've been taking and the things I've observed, and I need to share with the world. So he did. And that was what this book was. So we all know the story of evolution, so I'm not going to focus on that. However, the one thing that I did really, really love about this book that made me think about was it took Charles Darwin almost 30 years to actually publish his observations and theories. So we all know about the RMS Beagle, the ship that he sailed to the Galapagos and started collecting stuff and knowledge. Did you know that, by the way? Like it was 30 years before like this book came out, from when like the RMS Beagle and he took that voyage, like
Right.
and then everything in between. Were you aware of that?
Yeah, I mean, it took a long time to collect those samples, and he actually wasn't going to publish it until he found out that somebody has a similar, I guess.
Yeah, he almost was forced.
Coming out, and he was forced to publish it before he was ready.
Right.
Because this is really his life long work, and it's also very controversial. So he didn't
want to
he
do it.
wasn't ready to publish it. He was just collecting stuff and was just writing it, and just because somebody else was going to publish it before him, so he hurried up and did it.
Exactly. So like that was what blew me away the most, was learning about that, and realizing that it took him 30 years of observations, of patiently sitting and watching and taking notes and watching things happen and unfold, of him just observing the world, right, before he decided he wanted to speak, and then when he did decide to finally put his voice into what he had seen, his words changed the world in a lot of ways. Is this definitively correct? I'm sure not. I'm sure there's a lot more that we need to learn and grow from and evolve from, but his ability to just shut up and watch the world around him allowed him to ultimately, have the time to process all this and to figure out, his own thoughts and his own ideas, and then share them in a very succinct manner. The whole always be impeccable with your word, right? Like, I mean, that was like, it took him a long time to figure out like what was he seeing and how could he put it together in a way that he could describe it to somebody else. Because as we've also talked about, you might read a phrase, it takes a true artist to distill all that down into something that other people can consume. It doesn't take anything to read things, right? So Darwin, the process that he went through is really the big thing that I took away from this book and learned from myself. And as you know, I talk a lot, and I talk too damn much, probably a lot of times, right? So this is a problem of mine that I would love anything more in the world to change, is if I could just shut the fuck up sometimes and just listen to people when I'm, in a conversation with them, I know that this is something that I would love to focus on, but like, I don't know why. I just am compelled to talk. There's so many ideas when I'm talking to somebody that are just filtering through my head, and so many things, so much energy bubbling out of me, and I just can't stop myself, right? So for me personally, I've tried really, really hard over the years to try to figure out ways to scale that back and to try to be, more Darwin-esque, I guess, in my communication skills and interpersonal skills. And I never really had a lot of success, to be honest with you, because as we've talked about, going against the grain is never a good thing. However, when I found books, everything changed, right? Because with books, it has been, there's nobody I can talk to. I have to sit there and just shut up and take notes. Or if I don't take notes, it just goes in my head and goes out one other. Like, I know if the author was sitting in front of me and he was giving me his reading this book to me, or any book that we've discussed in this whole entire journey, I can guarantee you I would have been peppering him with questions, or her with questions about, well, what about this? Did you think about this? Or how does this go to this? And how does it, I mean, I guarantee you, I just would have never shut up, and it would probably have never gotten finished with that author telling their story. But luckily that's not how books work, right? You spend all that time to write this stuff down, and the other person on the other end is only receiving whatever you give that person. And if they, that's it, point blank period. Like, you either just shut up and listen and let things just absorb over time, or you don't. Like, and for me, it worked. Like, it was the first time in my life that I've ever, in a concentrated period of time, have just sat and listened to somebody else's words, and no rebuttal. And over time, I've kind of slowly started to learn a little bit more and more the value and the power of that, of just observing and letting things sink in, and letting things mash up together, and letting new ideas kind of percolate in my head together, and not diving in on everything that I see firsthand, and just kind of taking it all in at once, right? Observing and letting the story play out in front of me, and then, seeing where I go from there. So this book taught me to shut up, basically. And I don't know, it took Darwin 30 years to come up with on the origin of species. I mean, who the hell knows if I keep on this track record and in the next 30 years where I'm going to be, but I know it'll definitely be in the direction that I want it to go. And that is pretty cool. So that's the reflection for the day. Love to pause there and get your thoughts.
Yeah, so for me, I think I may have mixed feelings about your reflection. I think, I mean, in a sense, we want to expand our confinement, but at the same time, we also want to have the ability to be ourselves. And so there is a fine line between, do I want to challenge myself to expand that confinement and kind of get out of my comfort zone, quote unquote. And then also at the same time, do I want to constrain myself? Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, it's need to have a balance of some sort. Because if I ask you, Chris, would you spend from today, you're 30-something, right? From today, for the next 30 years, I want you to shut up and watch and do what Charles Darwin does.
I
can't do it. You can't do it. You know why?
Because I talk. I like to share. I like to communicate.
Because you're not Charles Darwin.
Yeah. No, I know.
And Charles Darwin is not you.
Right.
The reason why Charles Darwin is able to do this observation, because is something that he likes to do. He enjoys doing it. It feels anchored when he does it. That's who he is. Who you are is not that. So you can't try to say, okay, I'm Chris. I'm this energetic person. I'm this talkative person. I have a million ideas in my head and I want to express it. And then go put a lid on it. This is why I'm hearing you. Put a lid on being Chris. So that's what I'm saying. It's a balance between, and I'm torn between the two. I do understand your point of view from trying to stop talking too much and find out whether or not the silence can give you a fresh perspectives.
Right.
If you want to expound on that constraint, you're constrained by who you are.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, when you expand that constraints, but if that constraint doesn't give, right, you should do something else. For me, that's why I'm saying I don't like to go against the grain. I don't like to go against the river up the stream. I don't. I go downstream all the time, because even if I have to change and orient my positions, right, and my environment, so that I go downstream. So for me, is I'm always goes with the wind or with the grain of with my grain. I don't mind going against the grain of someone else's,
Right.
but I would not go against the grain of me. For me is I don't want to be not me, if that makes any sense.
I totally,
So
I totally agree with you on that.
So I can understand if I don't know who I am yet, then I need to constrain myself a little bit in one way or another to find out who I am. But once I know who I am really, then I want to express 100% of me and not be constrained by, because you're looking at Charles Darwin. I don't want to be Charles Darwin. I mean, he's great.
Right.
And he gave us this like very controversial idea that now we took as a foundation, as a pillar for us to build our knowledge on top of. And that is great. And we appreciate him for it, but I cannot do what he does. I just can't.
Agreed.
I cannot do something like that for 30 years and just put it to myself and put notes and go out and into the wilderness by myself and just write down the notes. This is something a very, very special person to do that kind of work for
Agreed.
30 years, and probably more if it wasn't there for the fact that he has to try to publish before somebody else publishes his work. And so for me is I cannot be Charles Darwin, and I don't want to be like Charles Darwin. I don't want to be like Elon Musk. I don't want to be like Bill Gates. I don't want to be like Steve Jobs.
Right.
I just want to be me. And the most important question for you is, do you like talking?
Yeah. No,
so why are you putting a lid on talking?
So you gotta give me a chance to rebut. You know, like let me do what I do best. What I mean by this in particular, I agree with everything you're saying. We've talked about this a million times over. Always do what you do best, right? And don't ever go against the grain, per se.
Against your grain.
Against your grain.
Because you have a certain tendency for one thing or another based on your genetic, your characteristic or your upbringing, whatever. There's certain thing that you do well, and it's easy for you to do that well. And it's just for you, is you talk so fluently, and you can talk a lot, and you talk all the time, and you bring so many ideas to the table, and you make it interesting and not boring. People go to sleep, right? That's a talent that most people would kill to have. But then you say, "Hey, I don't want to use it."
Hang on. Well, pump the brakes. So let me rebut. All right. So I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. I mean, that is a central tenet. Is tenement a word? Tenant. Central tenet of what we are trying to build here is to help people to channel their energy into things that they naturally love, and to create the art that comes from that, versus running upstream, to eat the cake, not eat the frog, all that stuff that we talk about, right? So that, with that said, the whole second part of this reflection was for me I'm not going against the grain because I love to learn, and that is the format that is in. So I've found a way to go with the grain and shut up and listen, because I was unbalanced when all you would do is talk, but you weren't consuming enough knowledge to continue to further the conversation that I like, of the things that I like to do, right? So for me, this was a way to balance all that out by doing something else that I love to do, which is learning something new every single day, and gave me a format where I was forced to shut up. Like, I mean, I'm saying I appreciate having clamps put on me during that time, because it's made my conversations that much more fluent, and my ideas that much more focused, and my direction that I want to take to be more impeccable with your words, right? Like, it's one thing to just talk all day long, but it's another thing to be impeccable with your words as you're saying these things that are coming out of your mouth, right? So I have to sit and listen to the 4 agreements to get
right. So for me, the thing is, I think I understand what you're saying, but for me, is the way I think is that you love to talk. So what you're trying to do in my head is you're trying to be a even better talker.
Yes.
You want to talk in a more concise and clear and clear way with the ideas and whatnot. So for you to train yourself to be a better talker, that I can understand.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's not about I love to talk, but I'm gonna put a lid on it so that I can learn some more. So I know I'm training myself so I can be even better. And that's how I see from the lesson that you put out here. It's not about trying to put a lid on something that you're really good at, right? So it's not about shut up and listen, because it's harder. You mentioned it's very hard for you to just.
It's impossible. I've tried. I'm not. It's not gonna happen
because it's not you.
Right. It's
not you. You're going against your grain, which is whatever that is you cannot be, silent for that long. You just have, you say, hey, time out, put a lid on it, right? Because you need to put your words in. You're always gonna stop me. And for me is, a lot of people look at me like, for me, if I talk, I talk. You don't get to I don't reserve in my opinions. And so for me, it's I can go head to head with you, but other people, they reserve, they'll stop, and then you be the one that's talking all the time.
I know, for sure. And it happens regularly. I mean, I don't know if this is a good thing, but whenever I get rolling, sometimes like my throat will hurt at the end of a conversation just because I'm like, man, I was just talking too damn much, and for me, it feels like a release, but I'm sure, if I'm not saying something relevant to somebody, like you said, like if you're going to talk a lot, you got to be able to keep people's attention and keep them captivated and keep them in the dialogue.
That's basically a ability for somebody to massively be able to transmit these ideas and concepts to other people, and that's a good thing. That's why having that ability gives you an edge on becoming a leader, right? Whatever organization you go to, you have the ability to lead, because you can lead people by sharing the ideas and concept that you have through your head onto other people's head, and basically create a one unison organizations. And having that skills is powerful. And basically we are superpower when we are combined together in work in unison. And having that skill is really, really damn, it's to be envied. People envy those kind of skills. But at the same time, it's one of those things where you want to be even better at doing the things that you're good at, because at the end of the day, there's so much things that it's just not like you don't reach a limit, because we don't know what our limits are. And once we found our calling, it can exponentially go forever. That means you can always have room to improve. And that's why having to learn different skills, like this book teaches us to kind of maybe not only to continue doing better what we do, but to make it even better by learning how to restrain it and see what happens to it. Because you restrain it and you couldn't do it, because it's that's something that you have, and that is something you love to do. And to put a lid on it makes it kind of like depressing, because you feel like you constrain somehow,
right? And
not having your word, kind of expressed, it feels like you're being imprisoned in a mental way. So I think having your passions and continue to develop the passion, not passion, but your purpose. Purpose and passion, a lot of people use it, kind of like interchangeably, but it's about your purpose. Your purpose is essentially what it is that you are, who you are, and what your mission is. What you're good at. I mean, it sounds like cliche, but it's if you think about it, it's what you're good at. And a lot of people are good at certain things, and they should be proud of the things that they do, and not feel like, oh, I can't speak, right? A lot of people say, okay, I can't speak, and they want to speak up. And there are a lot of people who speak too much, they want to shut up. So that's not about putting a lid in your ability, but harness it to say, okay, instead of speaking randomly at everything, at every ideas, can I orchestrate it in a way that is more cohesive, more focused, more influential, like more, you know, persuasive, and having those kind of combinations, I think will give you I think you find it more joy even after your constraint of trying to say, okay, instead of saying everything, I want to channel it into one specific thought or ideas.
Right.
And I think that's going to expound on that talent, and having your meaningful work become even more meaningful.
I 100% agree. So, like, to be clear about the reflection about Darwin in particular, we have no idea. Maybe Darwin was a huge talker. Like, maybe just observing nature was his way of just shutting up by himself, you know, to get. I don't know. I guarantee.
Well, I doubt it though.
I mean, well, wait. I can guarantee you the dude didn't just walk around with a notebook all day long and never say a word. He talked about these ideas to other people. It's not like he just, you know, poof one day, like, you know, this mad genius like produced this work that you know came out of nowhere. I mean, it took him 30 years of working through this stuff with somebody else, with other people, with having conversations, you know, formulating these ideas. It wasn't like he just observed the world and then, you know, the words came to him. So I guess what I'm really advocating for in this particular, you know, reflection is the power of observation to like you said, to enhance you know, what you do really, really well, right? Like, he was really good at formulating hypotheses and watching, you know, the world around him and being able to tie the dots together. That's what he was really good at. It wasn't necessarily just shutting up and listening, you know, it was observing the world and drawing connections, you know, but it took him a long time to probably draw those connections and figure out what that was. For me, on my side of the house, like what you hit the nail on the head. Like, what I really am passionate about is help people live a balanced life and to find meaningful work and and to do that with meaning and build meaningful relationships while doing it. Like, that is what I care about. The entire new team that I just started at this new job, the entire team intro that I'm working on, and, you know, our core values as our team, and our rules and the culture that I'm going to build for my own particular team that aligns to the core values of the business, as well as, you know, taking into account the core values of the individual and doing all these different activities that I have planned. None of that would have been possible if I didn't shut up and listen to all these different authors along the way. And none of the future evolution of this will be possible if I didn't, you know, shut up and listen.
Right. I mean, like I said, I do understand your point, but I want to clarify that. So it's to a lot of people, it seems like you want to put a lid on it, but it's not about that. It's about doing more of what you love, which is talking.
Right.
So for me, the way that I see it, right? The way that I see, because I know you long enough, the way that I see is I mean you, is I am shutting up so I can talk more. If that makes sense. That's what I'm getting from you. And I want to make sure the
exactly right.
The viewers are understanding this is what Chris meant by saying, hey, I need to shut up because I talk too much. That's not what he meant. He meant I want to talk more, but I want to talk in a better, more concise, more persuasive way. Because imagine if Chris were leading a team of 8, 10, 20, 30, 100 people, and he doesn't talk, right?
It'd be awful. Yeah.
It'd be awful. But he wants to observe other people and say, okay, what is this guy good at? What does he has an affinity for? And then talk to him about this affinity, this dreams, or whatever. So the connection there he can make is going to be much more meaningful so it's about talking more, but more in a more an optimal way.
Right.
For about lack of a better word, you know, more in a way that is compatible to the person that he's talking to, versus just talking just for the sake of talking. It's talking for a topic that can relate to another person. So the way to talk more and to get more out of that talk and to deliver better talk is to be able to shut up and watch first, understand before trying to be understood, right? So that's that's what I'm
Yes.
getting from this reflection.
Yes.
But if you don't know Chris well enough, when you read through this reflection here, you're thinking he's talked too much. He's trying to put a lid on it. That's not the lessons for today.
No, not at all. Not at all. But it is. You just. I think you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, like 100%, just crushed it. But and the other thing that you just made me think about is talking more by writing, right? Like when I write my thoughts out, and I can share, I can share this with, in theory, as long as language forever, it exists forever.
Anyone who wants to read it can read it, and it will hear you speak.
They can hear my voice, like through my writing, right? So
yes.
I'm not only speaking more, I'm also
not only this generation, but future generations and future generations, as long as the works persist through the times.
Exactly. I'm not shutting up. If anything, I talk way more because I write all the time.
So that's the point, is
right.
Shutting up so I can talk more.
Yes.
That's the quote that it comes to my mind when you saying these things and trying to formulate, because I know Chris for more than 2 years, 2.5 years, almost 3 years now, coming so I know Chris, and so talking is his thing, and he is at home when he does his talking. And for me, if you trying to shut up, we tried this before. I mean, there was a time when you remember that challenge?
Oh, yeah.
At a meeting, say, I only talk for 5 minutes total, and you time yourself, and then you say, well, this is a count, or this is a count. It's like, no, it counts. So even that was a struggle. And so it wasn't fun for him. And we were sitting there and was laughing at him because we knew he couldn't do it. And he tried his best. He did. He tried his darn best. And he always talked more than he should. But like I said, that's him, and that's who he is, and that's what Chris is. So be yourself and be better. Be a better version of yourself.
Yeah, if you're gonna talk more, you better have something to say. Like, I mean, that's
talk more, learn how to talk better, right?
Right, exactly.
Get better every time. So this is his way of talking more, is right, because when he talks to somebody, right, it doesn't persist through time. I mean, it could now with the podcast and videos, but with the writing, it actually lasts much longer than just having the voice and whatnot.
Right.
But the idea is to be yourself and to be a better version of yourself, upgrade yourself every once in a while by figuring out what you need to do to make that next level. When your secret is talking, but how do I talk better, right? So better doesn't mean more topic. Better could be how persuasive I am, how convincing, how clear my concept and ideas are that our person can understand. If I'm a person that understands a different set of like parameters or different variable or different environment, right? He can talk to me in that particular word or context, and I can relate. But he talks to me from his perspective, then all he does is all I hear is his words, right? It doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't. I can't relate to him. But he's talking about having things that knowing your why, learning to take care of yourself, learning to learn, ask questions that that people believe to be true, but it's not. So these things relates to me, and I can understand that, and I can relate. And if he talks to someone else, like if he talks to his friends or whatever, he doesn't bring this kind of stuff up. He brings up some other stuff. And that's his ability to talk, but talk well on that level. He's not talking about, hey, talk the same topic to everybody. Somebody doesn't want to talk about.
They would not want to talk about. They would not want to talk about on the origin of species. I can guarantee you. I mean, there's a lot of times when I want to slide in a book to somebody, and I'm like, this is a bad idea.
Just go to work first thing in the morning and say, hey, today I want to talk to you on the origin of species about Charles Darwin. Did you know that Charles Darwin spent 30 years doing this thing?
I mean, I can't even imagine what that would. I mean, honestly, like people, you would just be that guy at that point in time where people are like, oh my God, this dude just sucks. Actually, it's what you're like a Chris interpreter.
A what?
A Chris, a Chris interpreter. Like we'll call you a Chris interpreter.
Chris interpreter?
Yeah, an interpreter of whatever the hell is going on up here and what I've tried to put out there. True is like an interpreter of Chris. He like speaks.
Oh, Chris interpreter.
Yeah. Because you're saying it better than I could have said it, because I agree with you. I mean, that is exactly what I mean by this. Is like, this has been my counterbalance to help me to be more me, right. And it's life changing when you can not only do the other things find other things that you love to do to help enhance other things that you love to do, and when they all start to come together, like that's really powerful. And that's when you produce a book like On the Origin of Species 30 years later, or you do. I just finished the Nelson Mandela autobiography. Like that guy, I don't really agree with a lot of the stuff that he did in his life, but what I can really agree with is how he lived his life. I mean, that guy lived his values every single day. I'm sure of that. I mean, after listening to his book and hearing how he conducted himself, and every chance that he got a chance to live his mission or purpose in life, he did it. Like in every opportunity, whenever it was presented to him, he did it. But he stayed prepared the whole entire time, and he did the things that he loved to do, that he was great at, no matter what setting he was in. Like, I mean, whether he was in jail or whether he was leading the African National Congress, or whether he was a lawyer, whether he was the only time he didn't really do it was when he was a father and a husband. But and that's neither here nor there. I guess he kind of really gave himself to the struggle. But either way, it was like just hearing his story, and you see people like Darwin, you see all these like amazing people that go on to do these things that we all talk about now. Like that came from a lifetime of doing what they needed to do every single day, that gave them energy and fuel to one day see the big payoff or something along those lines that they were never working for. Like Darwin didn't go on the RMS Beagle to go, someday I'm going to write, the theory of evolution. He just wanted to go. He was just curious and wanted to just like, sounds like a fun trip. Let's go. I like to do this stuff. Like, I'm in. Like, and he did it, kept doing it. He kept doing it 30 years later. And then all of a sudden you got On the Origin of Species, right? Like, it wasn't like Nelson Mandela when he was 30 years old was like, you know what? I'm going to be the first Black president of South Africa, and I'm going to overthrow the political system. I'm going to do this, this, and this. No, he was like, I'm just going to fight for freedom for people every single day in any single way that I can, and do what I can do. And lo and behold, 60 years later, that was what ended up happening, right? Like, and that's how meaningful things happen. That's meaningful work,
Right, because it's a win-win situation, because you think about it, you get to live the life that you want. When you do that, right? Whatever you do,
right,
there's a purpose. And when you have a purpose, it doesn't matter. You don't feel like depressed. You don't feel desperate just because
engaged.
You're engaged in it, because you know that this is something that makes me feel at peace with myself.
Every day.
Even if I go out there to a unknown island somewhere and just find different species and record them and send them back. I mean, I like doing that. And I don't see myself stopping. So with the blink of an eye, it's 30 years. Yeah. And with 30 years, Charles Darwin have amassed this massive collections of all these species. And he sees some trends because of all of the data he has. He sees trends and said, well, maybe this is the way it works. And he sees them. But without that kind of the compound effect result that he has, he wouldn't be able to figure out the evolution of the concept of evolution, because it's not enough. But that's the thing, is he's not going out there saying, I'm going to one day be this author of this book, or anyone say, hey, I'm going to be the president of South Africa, when first guy to do that.
Yeah, I mean,
if
have
you do
freedom.
that, then it becomes a struggle, because you yearn for the day, because you are not where you're supposed to be, right? And it doesn't matter where you are. Because I told you about the guy who makes $1 million. He is so depressed because his neighbor makes 1.1 million. Okay, I mean, you're talking about a freaking guy who makes $1 million, right? If he's not happy with him 1 million, he ain't gonna be happy with 1.1. He ain't gonna be happy with $100 million.
Right.
It isn't, because you are trying to be somewhere you're not. So when you say I'm gonna be president of South Africa, like Nelson Mandela or whatnot, he would never get there, because he never does a thing that is in the moment where he has control to do the things that's necessary to get him there, because he's
Right.
always trying to live in a place that he want to be, where he's, you know, in a different place.
Yeah.
So you have to love and find purpose in the present. Whatever you do today, like it. If you don't like it, find things that you like to do, because find the thing that you have you're skillful at. You are at peace with you, whether it's fishing. Some people hate fishing, some people love fishing. Why is that?
Fishing. I fucking
Exactly, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
people love, when they will get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, they
Right.
fish to 6 o'clock and they go home. The thing about it, to some people, it's like, that ain't
It's awful.
that is stressful. But for some people, it's, you know, at peace. So that's the thing. If you find the things that you are good at, meaning you like to do, and I don't know how, but that's just a way we are made. We are made for a certain thing. You know, we are put. Let's say for me, I'm like 5'6", right? I can't play basketball, so I don't love basketball, because it's not fitted for me to be basketball. Because basketball, you know, you need somebody who's 7 foot 7'7" to play basketball. So I don't enjoy playing basketball. I just don't. You know what I mean? So
What if we started a small person league?
And maybe, but
Yeah, maybe, yeah,
it's not called basketball. It's called whatever. It's just like
call
tennis
it a
versus
different game.
pickleball, right?
Yeah, call it a different game. I don't care. We'll call it
a
a
different game.
small
But
person
that's the thing,
league.
is you are fitted for something specific for you and your
Right.
genetic makeup. So find that and enjoy what you do today. And like I said,
Don't worry about the moonshot, right? Don't literally worry about
don't
going
worry
to the
about
moon.
moonshot. For you and me
Yeah.
today is like, you and I are doing this podcast, this you know, year of magical learning.
It's a great
I have
example.
never ever thought about the day when we stop. Say, hey, you know,
we're gonna be the number one YouTube channel. You know, we're gonna get 5 million, you know, subscribers or something like that. You know, like, you know, I'm saying, like, if that was what we set this out as, to be like, hey, we're gonna be the number one YouTube, you know, pod or whatever we call it. I don't even know what we call this. We're gonna be the number one YouTube thing, and we're gonna have, you know, 20 million subscribers. Like, that's what we're gonna do. True, we're gonna put all of our might into that.
Yeah,
right?
and
like,
so you're gonna stress out. You're gonna stress out, and you're not gonna be good at what you do, because you're gonna say, well, I need to say something stupid on here, or I wanna be impeccable, or whatever. Then you're not being yourself, and no one cares about. They cares about what can we offer them that benefits them. You know, so you gotta be at the present, be the best of yourself right now, and don't think about the other stuff, because if you don't like today, right, tomorrow for you is not going to come.
No, not at all. Even if it does,
is that a truism?
Like, if you want it to be, there's no rules.
I don't know. I just made it up. I don't know.
So you're even if you want that to be the case, right? Like, and even if it does happen, like, let's just say, you know, you do become the biggest YouTube star out there or something along those lines, right? Like, you know, it's like when you go to the Olympics or something along those lines, and a lot of those athletes have that huge letdown, because like they put all that stake into this. If this happens, then it'll all be worth it, right? Like I don't think Darwin went on the Beagle and said, if I can figure out the theory of evolution, you know, this will all be worth it. Like, you know, and like, you know, spend his whole entire life trying to figure that thing out. No, he just observed, and he slowly but surely, like we talked about, right? Now, if you went to the Olympics and said, like, look, I will be happy if I could just be, you know, the most gold medals anyone's ever won in skeet shooting or what, I don't even know what the hell, some of the, you know, some random obscure Olympic sport or something like that, right? Like, it's if that's what you set your target on, you're never, I can guarantee you, the moment you achieve that, it's not going to be fun. The literal moon. Like, I remember reading the book Rocket Man, that we'll talk about in the future. Buzz Aldrin, like, just lost his shit after he came home. He became depressed, became an alcoholic. His life fell apart, all this other stuff, because that was all that he lived, and that was all that he cared about. The literal moonshot was like this goal in his mind of, well, once I do that, he had no vision beyond that. Like, even when you accomplish it, it felt empty and it felt stupid and it felt, awful. And people would ask him, like, hey, how'd you feel when you were at the moon? He was like, I don't know. I didn't feel anything. I was just doing what I was trained to do. And I don't like, I mean, there was like no emotion. There was nothing. And then afterwards he was like, shit, this sucks. Like, I don't know what else I'm supposed to do with my life, So like, that is awful. Like, that is not what life is about. So to your point, like, I think you summed it up great with this particular, lesson. Do the stuff that you love to do, and it'll be effortless. And, and then find other things to do to help enhance the things you really love to do. And, I think you'll live a really healthy life, like, I mean, that's the basic tenet, right?
Yeah. So, if this podcast gets to like 1 million subscribers, you know how I feel?
I don't care.
It's like, yeah, because
whatever.
there's no difference between what I'm doing today and the day I have 2 million subscribers, right?
Right.
Because it doesn't change me. And I want to bring up that point, because when you live in the future and you shoot for that moon, when you shoot for that moon and you achieve it, when you achieve it, you know what's going to be a guarantee for you? You will change.
Right.
You will change. You will not be the same person you were. Just like, hey,
true.
I moved from this house to that house, I changed completely. This is the reason why a lot of people, they were good in the beginning. When they get to the point where they are projected to go, they change and become more corrupted and more evil.
Right.
Right. It's not like you need it. You look at the Facebook, you look at the Google, you look at bunch of these companies, right? They become evil, right? Twitter become evil because it's not like they need the money. They don't need the money, but they change themselves because when Facebook become public, right? Zuckerberg got a bunch of money. He become even more obsessed with controlling people or getting. And so the thing is, whenever you don't have the ability to be yourself after an event happened, like Buzz Aldrin, then you have the change in you, and the change in you going to cost you to have either depressions or change into something you don't want to be.
I 1000% agree with what you just said, except for I will throw a big caveat in with like the companies you brought up. At a certain point in time, I actually do think that Zuckerberg and like Jack Dorsey and people like that started their businesses without this being the end in mind. They just wanted to, Mark Zuckerberg just wanted to be able to skis on chicks.
I agree with that. I agree with that. But I was going to say that the only reason that when they became evil, because they did become evil, and it wasn't because they have that change quickly.
Well, it was because of the investors. Like they
pump in that money. They have become so Zuckerberg was doing the thing he was doing, right? He didn't have this goal or whatever, and he lived in that. It's just that whenever they go public, right? Suddenly he become a billionaire.
Right.
Okay. He just changed from whatever millionaire or whatever to a billionaire. It changed him.
Yes.
It changed him. Jack Dorsey the same way. They changed him, right? And that's what I'm saying is whenever you are not doing what you want today and you're yearning for something, and I guarantee you, yes, Zuckerberg didn't know that he's going to become this successful, but he still yearns for it. He yearns for something bigger.
Yeah.
And when it came, then he changed.
I
for the worse. That's why power corrupts. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. That's the reason why I think that you have to understand that the drastic change, like a steep fall, a steep up, right? Change who you are fundamentally. Yeah. That's why when people look at if we look at people at the Olympic, right? When you win the gold medal, right? And then what happened after that is a complete change. I've done all this all my life. I've trained all my life. Now it's like, okay, I win the gold medal and I don't do it anymore. I don't train anymore. Let's say I retire like Michael Phelps does, right? he completely lost. And what am I doing now, right? Even though he wins all the gold medals and all the records and all that, that's great and all, but it's a completely different person, different change. So that changed that person in totality.
I may be misremembering this, but I think I remember hearing Michael Phelps say he talked about killing himself like many times. Like I mean, like that's like that just sucks. I mean, like
depressed.
Yeah, I mean that just
depression does it to you.
Yeah, I mean that just sucks. Well, anyway, all right. I know we're a little off track, so let's bring it back into the final thoughts for the day. So the question. Well, do you have any final thoughts for the day?
Just be yourself and be the best of it. The better, the better yourself.
Find more ways to enhance
you have with your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was not the reflection, the conversation that I thought we were going to have, this is always the fun of this.
But that's the point. That's the point of it.
Yeah,
isn't say, hey, I want this reflection. It's what can we learn from it?
I agree. That's what I said. I'm glad that we had it because I really enjoyed it because I think you're fluent in Chris and I feel I'm fluent in True as well. I mean, there's been many times
I'm fluent in criticism.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So the question we can leave for everybody for today is what might you learn if you just shut your mouth and started listening to the world around you? I'm not saying don't do what you like to do. Just observe and learn and keep building on whatever you do great.
What do you do? What can you do to make that better? Like if you love to talk, how do I talk better? If you love to listen, how do I listen better?
Exactly. You probably listen better by talking and going exactly the same opposite of it, right? Like if you started talking all the time,
the goal is still the same. That's the purpose of the lessons and reflection here is whatever that you do and wherever you have a knack for, try to improve that. And what do you need to improve is, whatever goes, whatever inspires you to make that better, do it. If it is to, shut up and listen for a while, then that's a way. Try and see if it works. And for you, apparently it's working. You know what I'm saying? So
for sure.
The point is to be, how can Chris be more Chris? How can True be more True?
And sometimes it's not always the way that you think. It does not necessarily mean double down on the same
and that's
stuff.
why learning is part of our core values. Is how do I know? Well, I gotta try it. It could be counterintuitive, but the core values and the point that the point of reference that we try to hold on to still the same is be more of who you are, because no one can be better, you than you.
Agreed. That's a great way to end it. Well, thanks for everyone joining, and thanks for the great conversation as always, True. And we will see you all tomorrow.
Yeah, sounds good. See you next time.